Thank you. Good morning. It's lovely to be here again. Good to see you. Good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. It's very nice. And to see you online also. So I have a little bit of a plan for you for today. Part of it is that there are going to be 2 daylongs, one today and one tomorrow, as you probably know. And I want to encourage you to go as deep as you can today and tomorrow. So we were thinking to really keep noble silence as best we can today, even at mealtime. And of course, if you need to know something in order to get ready or to do something, of course, quietly ask or help someone, whatever. But I think if we can, you know, compose the mind and keep it pretty silent, I think we can get more out of this day together. And then tomorrow, maybe the mealtime can be a bit more social. So you get a little of both. And a while ago, I asked about a possible topic for these 2 days. And I'm going to paraphrase this, but it was something like, well, it kind of keeps coming up in different ways that there's a wish to understand how to let go of our opinions and views, especially when we're engaged with people who have very different views than we do. How to be able to do that and still maintain our integrity, still maintain our understanding of what feels right. So, in thinking about that, in thinking along those lines, particularly in the social and cultural context that we're experiencing, I was reflecting on how it would be very nice to give some thought, some reflection, of course, to the Dhamma. Where does the Dhamma guide us in this? But specifically along the lines of each of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So, really, how does practicing with this kind of situation in mind where we're confronted by maybe some very strong views and opinions that are completely opposed to our own, and to be able to show up really with the the grounding, the immersion in the Dhamma, and the uh, ability to really meet that in a way that's clear, strong, kind, and so on. So that's what I'm thinking about. I don't know what I'm going to say or how it's going to unfold, but I wanted to share that idea with you now before we meditate so that can kind of be there in your heart and not to figure it out, just to let it cook. And it's really lovely to see you. I want you to know. So I think we'll start with some meditation. So find a comfortable position. Letting the spine be erect but not stiff, relaxed. Kind of tuning into the body and noticing any parts that are uncomfortable or a bit tight. And allowing them to release, relax. You might pay a little more attention to the area around your eyes and let them soften. And your jaw, relaxing your shoulders, your belly, relaxing your arms and hands and your legs. Putting your attention on your breathing, or if you're someone for whom that doesn't feel comfortable, then use whatever space or object, maybe some area of the body where it feels safe, comfortable to put your awareness. Breathing in, breathing out, relaxed. Breathe in happily, breathe out happily. So Ajahn Ganha, who you may or may not have heard of in Thailand, he says meditation is easy. Just breathe in happily, breathe out happily. Breathe in relaxed, breathe out relaxed. And when we establish mindfulness and we're aware of our breathing in and our breathing out, then the mind is already in a different position, one of observing, of being aware, present to whatever it is we're experiencing. We can use the breath or whatever object of focus we find comfortable and really allow the body to become tranquil. Breathing in and breathing out, aware of the whole body. And inviting the bodily processes, whatever might be going on with the body to become calm. And at the same time, we want to keep the mind alert. The mindfulness is bright and alert, clearly aware the whole time you're meditating. So there is that energy, that effort, that's the right amount. And allowing our attention to notice any pleasant feeling arising in the body. Or a pleasant feeling arising in the mind. Just from relaxing, just from being mindful, we can feel joy, happiness. And by putting our attention on pleasant feeling, oftentimes it expands, grows, blossoms. And this is a great support for samadhi. And samadhi being a state of calm where the hindrances are at bay. And we feel settled, abiding in a relaxed and settled, lucid calm. With the activity of the mind becoming more and more still. And if there are thoughts that they're in the background, not bothering the pleasant stillness and clarity of the mind. Which is so healing and fortifying to our whole mind-body system. So stay present with your meditation object or come back to it as often as is needed. And let the mind settle deeply into sweet, sweet meditation. Nice, nice feeling in the room. So that's samadhi or whatever. We don't have to think about levels or definitions, but whatever calm we experience, or even the persistent effort that is not trying. I hope that makes sense. I'll talk more about that probably later too, but just being able to sit quietly or do walking meditation, just being present to whatever degree is really an incredible resource for any kind of interaction with others. If you think about the support we get from meditation to be in the world in a different way, in a way that's got, I always think of it as having kind of my nerve endings wrapped in some kind of soft cotton or insulation, or not so raw. And as many of you know, a regular practice really helps to lay that in to the nervous system to really support our ability to be peaceful. And it's not just formal meditation, of course, it's also using a mantra through the day. Or we recently, someone was staying at our hermitage. We had a group coming down that came down from Seattle, from the Clear Mountain community, to help us build a kuti, a dwelling for monastics or lay friends who come to stay. And this one person has the practice of reciting the refuges in his mind all through the day. It's interesting to be around him. And I'm sure you've noticed this with people or in yourself when the ongoing practice is happening. Anyway, probably more about the resource of samadhi later too. At this focus we are planning or intending to have today around how do we prepare ourselves for challenges in relationship, in community. It can be any kind of relationship or interactions, really, at work, at home, with family members that we don't live with community, with our culture, with our society. And we know what it feels like to be at odds and feel the dukkha of that. And oftentimes the dilemma of how do I remain firm in my own sense of what's right, and how do I relate to someone who has very, or maybe very different life experience, and how can I support that interaction in being fruitful, peaceful. How can I show up in accordance with Dhamma? That's really the question. How can we live every aspect of our life in accordance with Dhamma? And oftentimes that means letting go of our desire to be right, or some of our views and opinions, So, as we look today and tomorrow at the Noble Eightfold Path, and I think what I will try to do is touch on each factor of the Noble Eightfold Path today for those who won't be here tomorrow, and then maybe come around to it again. We'll see what happens. I never really know what's going to happen. And none of us do, even though we think so. I think, you know, things change. But I'd like to start with some reflection on right intention. Right view, of course, is the first factor that's listed, but there's so many layers to it. I think we'll be coming back to it again and again in this exploration. But right intention is something we have the ability to decide. You know, so much of our behavior, um, our physical bodily behavior, our verbal behavior, and our mental behavior is kind of on um, not really automatic, but very strongly conditioned by our experience throughout our life. And it's when we actually give it some direct reflection that we can make choices about how we want to change that or how we want to use that. So, with right intention, the Buddha talked about renunciation, non ill will, non cruelty, as opposed to sensual desire, ill will, and cruelty. And how can we make that a reality in us to be on the side of letting go, of the mind of this willingness, this attitude of letting go, and this attitude of what is ill will, not anger, not resentment, non cruelty, not saying or doing things that are harmful to others in that way, cruel to others, disrespectful of others, dismissing others. And so when we have that intention, for me, I use different words. Um, and they may not be exactly the same meaning as the Pali for non ill will, non cruelty, renunciation, but I like kindness, compassion, and letting go. And I think we need to find the language that actually touches our own hearts. And when we set an intention like that, this is the ground from which I want to come. Of course, we want to make sure it's in line with the Dhamma. And it's interesting because I find that we don't really have to think about it all the time. We can set an intention and then just let it be. It's kind of like making a resolution and then writing it down and putting the paper in a drawer and just forgetting it. And then later you find you're actually moving in that direction without really planning. So I think this setting intention, I mean, certainly there might be times when we catch ourselves and we're not really acting in accordance with it. And then we can consciously take a moment to reorient. A lot of power in the unconscious. So maybe when we sit down to meditate, maybe when we're about to get up from meditation, or maybe it's just before we eat our breakfast, or whatever timing, to bring our mind to that intention. Letting go. Letting go. What are we letting go of? We're not letting go of the Dhamma. We're not letting go of our moral virtue, but we're letting go of our sense of self, really. And what comes with it, our views and opinions, our desire to be right, our sense of superiority or inferiority, or however we compare ourselves to others. Letting go, when we let go of the sense of self, that covers a lot of ground. And I'm probably going to mention Ajahn Gana from time to time because I really see him as a very important teacher for me at this point. And he's a monk in Thailand. You may or may not have heard of him. It doesn't really matter. But he's, you know, wonderful Kruba Ajahn who's, living his life from that place of total giving to support beings to awaken. And he talks a lot about taking the Dhamma as the basis for your life rather than the sense of self. And how, in general, we're operating from the sense of self because we're so strongly conditioned to think, I'm this body, I have this personality. I was thinking the other day, some of you might remember the days when, a young person would go traveling, backpacking somewhere to themselves. It's like, you find yourself, what are you finding? Are we really finding ourselves? What is my style? What is my, oh, yeah. So we build up all this conditioning and this focus on being me. And then later on, we find out that, yeah, that's not really who we are. There's something much bigger or something different. This sense of self and self-concern and fear of somehow losing ourselves or not getting what we need or not getting what we want. All those things that we are conditioned to believe that we should try to protect. But with the Dhamma practice, we actually can get to a place where we know there's nothing to protect. We can really drop the facade of presenting something other than Dhamma. And yet there's this practice, right? This practice of being in alignment with the Dhamma, living the Dhamma, using that as the basis of our life. And of course, that intention, that right intention, letting go, is in beautiful harmony with non-ill will, non-cruelty. That our thoughts can be of peace and kindness and respect. So when we're engaging with someone that we really disagree with, and people talk to us about these things, even not being able to be in the same room with someone who has opinions that are very different from ours. Neighbors that we're afraid of because they own guns. And, it's not like there's nothing to notice about being different. When I say there's nothing to protect, that's really coming from the place of understanding that this body and mind isn't really me, isn't really us. Whatever happens to it, there's really only one thing to be afraid of. And this comes through insight is wrongdoing. It's the only thing we need to fear. The only thing. Because whatever happens, the body's going to die anyway sometime. All kinds of things can happen to this vehicle that we have, but if at some point the practice comes to that place where we know that, it's important to take care of it, make use of it, to practice, to show up in the world with generosity and so on. But it's not ours. It's got its expiration date. Nobody knows what it is. And it even gets changed, I think, based on various causes and conditions. But who cares? It's just a vehicle. I know that can seem really radical. But if you read the suttas, if you take in the Buddha's teachings, he's really trying to tell us in many ways, don't attach to that thing. Because that'll be suffering. And so it's the whole of the Noble Eightfold Path, practicing all the different components of it, that really helps us come to that understanding ourselves. And that this collection of views and opinions that I have, which is different from knowing the Dhamma. Dhamma is a natural truth that is true everywhere, all the time, timeless, and immediately available when we turn to it, investigate it for ourselves. That's different from views and opinions. The truth of the way things work is not a view. Our view is the way we perceive, the way we understand, the way we've formulated our way of thinking about how things work in our society, in our culture. I mean, if you've ever spent time in a different culture where things are held differently, what it means to be respectful, what it means to show love, what it means to show disapproval. There are all kinds of differences. We've in Buddhism in the West, we've been taught not to stretch our feet out toward the shrine. Where did that come from? That is not, I mean, it's it's good to know what the cues are for respect in a culture, and be respectful and try to go along with what, but we don't have to think there's some kind of absolute value in that, absolute truth to that. There isn't. So much of our conditioning comes through from our culture, our society, and then there's this personal conditioning. And I don't remember. The last time I was here, I think it was when Ajahn Sumedho was here giving a talk. It's the last time I've seen him in person, and I remember distinctly him talking about the difference between sense consciousness and what he's calling as pure consciousness or ultimate consciousness or whatever. But I don't remember if he talked about the first two fetters at that time, but he's been talking about this a lot in his Dhamma talks, that the first fetter that falls, the first three fetters falling away with stream entry. The first one, identity view or personality view, that's all our personal conditioning. This idea that we're a certain gender, this idea that we're a certain race, this idea that we have certain capabilities, or we're told we're good at this and we're not good at that. My third grade teacher didn't post my drawing and she posted everybody else's throughout the year. And I'm like, oh, I'm not good at drawing. You carry that through your whole life. It's personal conditioning. And we've got this whole collection of things that we believe. I'm a generous person, or I'm a good person, or I'm not a good person, or, we've been given all these, whether we've been given the messages or not, those are the messages we received. And if we think about it, it's like, well, I could be good and I could not be good. And I have both. Or what do we call good? When good and bad. Um, good and bad is part of this realm. All these opposites, all these opposing views. And then the second fetter, the rites and rituals, is what we, um, unskillful or obsessive adherence to rites and rituals, or this idea that some ritual is going to save me. And Ajahn Sumedho's been talking about that as cultural and social conditioning, which to me just blew my mind. It's like it opened it up so big, like all of this stuff that we are conditioned to believe and accept and think this is the right way. This is the way. This is true somehow. And actually, it's really, the shaping of us culturally, socially, religiously, and to recognize that there's no absolute there either. That's not Dhamma. But these are the kinds of things we can get very, very staunch about and really want to fight about it, disagree about it, think we're right. Those phrases in the suttas, thinking this is right and everything else is wrong. And of course, that's never seen in a very good light by the Buddha. Excuse me. So, really considering, I don't know how many of you have family members that are really on a very different side of some of these issues than you are. Some of the presenting um, challenges in our culture right now, in our society, or just in our way of living, our way of operating in through this life. I have family members who are on have very different views from mine. And how do you how do you stay connected? How do you meet? How do you relate? Um, so we start with this wanting to do that with not non ill will, non cruelty, an attitude of letting go, and knowing that having a heart of kindness and compassion is more important than whether or not we can change someone else's mind. So starting with that intention and really preparing ourselves. I think it's very useful to prepare ourselves before the meeting at work that you know is going to be contentious, or the friend who wants to convince you that they're right about something that you know isn't in accordance with Dhamma. Say, is preparing ourselves. So as we look at the other factors in the Noble Eightfold Path, and by the way, this afternoon I'm going to open it up for questions. You may have things coming up in your mind already, but we'll try to be silent till kind of mid-afternoon maybe, and then listen to what's happening for you. But I think I want to look first at Sila, the aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path that are really in that that category, the sila category. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. So we've got our right intention in place. And from there, what's right speech? Well, in this case, in particular, which, as I said, can show up in any aspect of our life, this kind of contention. I think a very important part of right speech is actually listening and thinking of it as part of right speech, I think is really helpful. Because when we really listen, we're not thinking about what our response or retort will be. We're just really listening. And we can get ourselves into a place where we just don't even want to hear the words that other people are expressing. But I think your Dhamma is stronger than that. You know, we don't have to, if we prepare ourselves, I think we don't have to worry that we're going to kind of slip over some edge away from our own integrity, our grounding in Dhamma. But we can actually listen and hear where they're coming from. And I think the thing to look for are the parts that we can identify as understandable, in alignment with Dhamma. So maybe we need to think about, well, what is in alignment with Dhamma and what isn't? One really good place to look at that is the three characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. Another really good place to look is what's really moving in the direction of peace and what's moving away from peace. What is moving towards loving kindness, compassion, joy, and appreciation of the good and equanimity, and what's moving in the other direction. And think about all of the teachings of the Buddha as directional signs, not absolutes. And what that means is, you know, all of it needs to be discovered individually to really get it, to really own it, to really be Dhamma, being Dhamma, you know, one of those book titles of Ajahn Chah. Because really and truly, this whole personality thing is just a facade. And what is it that we are really? It's Dhamma. And once we know that, there's incredible confidence in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, unshakable. And once we know that, then we don't have to be afraid and we can listen. So we have to practice listening, even if we don't feel like it's all that firmly in place, but practice listening. And by being calm, a lot of times that's contagious. Sometimes it goes the other way. You have to be prepared for that. The calmer you are, the angrier they get because they want you to be angry with them. And it's like, well, I love you and I don't want to be angry with you. Maybe you can't say that to them. Maybe that's not the right thing to say, but you can feel it. Um, can we really love someone who thinks so differently than we do? I think so. It's a different kind of love than some kind of love that provide something for us. Real love is not about getting something anyway. So listening and what can we say that's right speech when we know that if I only listen, it's going to sound like I agree. Well, one thing that I have found really powerful is to just say, I don't believe that. I don't know if it'll matter to them. That really isn't the point. But, or that's not how I feel about it. Or I don't think that way. Maybe you get it. Maybe there's an opportunity to say why, that your experience of thinking that way just brings more misery and suffering, something like that. I think really when we're rooted in Dhamma, what comes up to say is much more likely to be something that really is effective. And I'm not saying we look for an effect out there. What's effective, I think, is that we are standing in our integrity and we are doing it without ill will, without cruelty, without rejecting this living being, but just being clear about rejecting views and opinions that are leading to harm. I guess I like the language better of just, I'm not accepting that rather than rejecting it. And to not lose our sense of kindness, happiness, and even joy as we stand firm and express our wish for the Dhamma to be alive in this present moment and apparent always. So, one way that we can maybe see through layers of aversion and hatred or fear is to see what's happening behind it. Look at ourselves or we look at others. When these feelings of anger or resentment or fear or sadness arise in us, to be able to appreciate where they're coming from and to be able to appreciate that in other people too. And sometimes it's going to go well and sometimes it's going to be awful because we don't control almost anything outside of what we say and do and think intentionally. But this practice of being able to be present with dukkha, to be present with others who are not on the same page as we are, to kind of check in on what page we're on. Are we on the Dhamma page or not? And to let go. And remember that it's much more important to not harm. And even if we are harmed, the negative results of that rest with the person who does the harm. So we want to be sure we aren't absorbing any of that hostility or anger or fear that we find around us. So I love these verses in the Dhammapada where, to be loving around those who are full of hate, to be peaceful around those who are hostile, you know, then whatever happens to us, what carries on is that peacefulness. It's way worse to kill than it is to be killed. I know there's, like to really come to that. And you can see that in any religious tradition or people who don't have religion at all. They can come to that understanding. Because the body is impermanent. And what's really important is that we maintain the heart in the way of Dhamma. And Dhamma isn't Buddhism. Dhamma isn't any religion. It's the basis for all religions, all spiritual growth and development, really. Available everywhere, whether you've heard about any religion or not, or you ascribe to it or not. Ajahn Kanhao say, all religions have the same aim, if they're really religion. Yeah, it's a whole other discussion, isn't it? What is Buddhism a religion? This came up during the retreat we were teaching just now that we've come from. And again, that gets into the realm of the intellect, the discursive mind, the reasoning. But Dhamma is beyond that. It's not really, you can't figure it out. You can't create a philosophy out of it. It's just truth. It's to be seen and known individually in the present moment. And it's simple and profound. So when we think about, well, what is Dhamma and what isn't, then one thing that's a really clear flag is whether or not there's dukkha. Because if we're experiencing dukkha, in no way feel somehow like you're failing or this is bad, because this is just how it is, but it's such a wonderful indicator. Then, if and it doesn't mean we have to necessarily change something, but what we do want to do as practitioners is be present with that dukkha, use the first three noble truths to work our way through and understand it, to really understand it and let it go. Because that reveals to us how our conditioning is kind of messing up the works in ourselves, and that we don't have to continue to maintain that conditioning. We can change. In fact, we are changing, but we can change those things that we've held on to for a long time. We can let them go. And when we're in this kind of situation where we're listening to someone who's might be saying things that we know are really leading down a dark path, we need to maintain the light in ourselves, the light of Dhamma, and just without words even, that could have a good effect. if we are keeping our own moral virtue, that's a huge protection. So, right speech is going to come from a heart of loving kindness. It's going to have a purpose that's good. How many of you know these here? You might know them all. It's going to be true and not false. It's going to be presented, well, gently, not harshly, although there are times when maybe it has to have a little energy behind it to get across. That's okay. Still doesn't have to be harsh or mean in any way. And it needs to be at the right time. At a time, when somebody's really upset, it's time to listen. What we say is probably not going to go in there anyway. So those aspects of speech that the Buddha talked about, as much as possible using those, as much as possible having that right intention behind it, the non-ill will, non-cruelty, letting go, being aware. And this is really some skill here, but being aware in the present moment of how we're feeling, what is arising in us, what are those feelings that are coming up, because our conditioning does have all these triggers in it, and then we're likely to feel all kinds of stuff, but that doesn't mean we have to act on it. And if we can be aware of it, maybe later we can sit down and recall it and practice with it and understand it more deeply, and hopefully there's some relief and release. But in that present moment, being present with what we're feeling, but also at the same time with that mindfulness, that presence, that awareness, being present with what the other person is expressing and probably feeling. That's pretty advanced, but I believe you can do it. Ajahn Sumedho talked about that, and you might have heard this story when he was starting Chithurst Monastery. When the English Sangha Trust bought that property, and there was this dilapidated, like really, really dilapidated mansion on it, and the monks are kind of living in, a part of it that wasn't totally falling apart. There's like the floor is fallen out in some places, and the roof is fallen out in some places, and it's just this horrible mess. And there's a lot of work to do. And I guess there was this one older lady who was coming a lot to help in various ways and stuff. And Ajahn Sumedho said, but she could be really challenging sometimes. And he yelled at her. And he's like, oh my goodness. Oh, I have to deal with that, like work on something here. And he said he really had to learn how to be able to be present with himself and observing what's happening in himself, and present with the other person he's listening to and what's happening with them. Because if we forget ourselves, if we're only out here, then something might come up, and before we can catch it, it's out there. But if we can stay present with, this, the practice that makes this possible is really just mindfulness of our feelings, of our emotions, and being able to locate them in the body, to be able to observe them. First three noble truths is really the practice. Being present with fear, anger, anxiety, resentment, whatever it is, and feeling where it presents itself in the body, and being able to be with it and let that unfold, let it process, see where it, just presence with it. And then we practice not reacting out of those emotions. So when we're listening or observing something happening that's triggering, we're not so much at risk of doing something or saying something that's going to bring further damage and outside of our intention. So that's our ongoing practice. And it's so easy to absorb the patterns of speaking that we hear around us all the time. And so we want to be conscious of that and make decisions about what's actually in alignment with my own intention and in alignment with Dhamma. And as I said, there's an opportunity to still be happy and joyful in the middle of this all. Not in a way that's like a kind of a spiritual bypassing thing, not a like, well, I'm just going to be floating on a cloud here. No, that doesn't really work. Um, not to paint everything roses, but to instead understand that there's always something to be grateful for. And there is a kind of joy in generosity and in experiencing the generosity of others. The fact that there are so many, and I'm wondering if how I want to say this. I was going to say so many people with good intentions and a good heart. But what about the people who don't agree with us? Don't they have a good heart? They do. Sometimes it takes a little of our own letting go to see it and see if, depending on the situation, we have more opportunity, in some cases than others, to really find the common ground. Instead of having the attitude of, oh, my neighbors are like this, and how about building some community and seeing, where they're coming from. Are there things that we can agree on? Are there things that we can understand, even if we don't agree on the methods for setting something on a better path? Are there things we can appreciate about what they're worried about or afraid of or struggling with? Sometimes when something has been reflected back to me about what I'm doing or saying, I can tell if I really want to reject it hard. Oh, I've got to look at that. It's a big indicator that there's something that I'm clinging to that's distorted. So these are some things to keep in mind around speech. And of course, our actions follow the same way of reflecting. It's like right action, of course, is um, not killing, not stealing, not engaging in sexual misconduct. So, in whatever situation we're in that we find contentious and challenging, checking on those actions. What does it mean to be clear in that? To not become a bully, even though we feel like we're dealing with one, and to not take the bait. I hear that's kind of a mantra in Portland these days. Don't take the bait. Don't play that game. Don't play any game. Come back to the Dhamma, something real and true and protective for everyone involved. So, what is right action? I hear about a group of people who are knitting over by you know where. Well, that sounds nice. Peaceful, creative activity. Kind of reminds you of your mother, doesn't it? Good thing to think about. um, or whoever in your life. Reminding each other of our humanity, the good sides of it, the natural impulse to want to help somebody. And remembering too that something deep in all of this around livelihood, right livelihood, that maybe some people are caught up in engaging in wrong livelihood and it's very detrimental to them or this situation, even though they'd much rather be at home with their families, caring about how it's going for them too. Right livelihood has a lot of layers. We might just think of our job, but it's more than that. We might get into that topic more later today. Doesn't quite feel like the right thing to expose at the moment, but we can talk about that, especially maybe in the Q&A part. And really think about, what is livelihood that doesn't kill, doesn't steal, doesn't take advantage in that way, doesn't use our energies in a way that's intimidating or alluring or manipulative. So just notice how these words land with you. What is it? What's the feeling inside? What's coming up? Not to put labels on that, but just to recognize that in order to know what we're feeling and what's coming up, we have to be mindful, aware, present. Present in that way that, has those words from Ajahn Sumedho with, it's like this. In this moment, it's like this. The memories that got evoked or the feelings that are triggered or the mental states. It's like this. And when the Buddha is instructing us to how to meditate and how to be mindful of our body, of our feelings, of our mind, it's always the turning towards it and being present with it first. And what is the state of my mind? Or what are the feelings that are arising? So we turn towards it first. It's like this. And then there's some follow on instruction, like calming the body or attending to the pleasant feelings so that they will spread and blossom, or gladdening the mind, lifting the mind up. So it depends on what's happening, whether what's useful is to really be there with it, observe it as it changes, as it moves through, so that it can be released, or investigate it. Where did this come from? Or how is it rooted in what kind of craving? So that it can be released. Or maybe the action that's useful is, I know what this is, I see it, and I can bring in this image, this thought, this intention to lift up the mind, to bring happiness, to bring up joy, bring up gratitude, bring up faith. So this is also a skill that we develop. Knowing how to work with our own experience in a way that's actually fruitful and beneficial, not avoiding, but to being there, allowing whatever it is to be seen, known, understood. Taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other, even when we don't agree, as best we can. Because even if we don't get along with our neighbors, if there was a fire coming through, if there was a tsunami coming our way, we'd help everyone. And I think they would too. So I think I'm going to leave the comments there for now. Give everybody a chance to get up and stretch if your legs still work. I'm sure they'll work. Don't worry. And maybe do some walking meditation. For those of you who are going to be doing something to get ready for the meal, we have time for that. Please, again, try to maintain noble silence and enjoy it. Um, I'm noticing how lucky we are to be here together in this lovely space. And for you at home, enjoying where you are, safe and We're so lucky to be able to draw upon the Dhamma of people around the world. I mean, what an incredible time we're living in when arahants are giving Dhamma talks online. It's like pretty fabulous. Okay, so enjoy. And then we'll see you back here, I hope, later. Welcome back. Or welcome, depending. So I want to talk a little bit about right effort. And I understand that that's the theme for the Upasaka training this month here. And so some of you are probably really digging into that one. And it's interesting looking at what the Buddha said about right effort, that it really is the effort, the determination, the enthusiasm and persistence to cultivate what's wholesome and turn away from what's unwholesome, to not tolerate unwholesome mental states. And of course, some of what comes through the tradition, um, or the various traditions of Buddhism, can look a lot more like, I'm going to sit until my blood dries up and my sinews dry up and my bone, whatever, that kind of really fierce determination that actually seems to go too far to the ascetic side sometimes, or the austerities. So I think it's good to recognize that I think right effort is a lot more about taking initiative and applying effort, but really hanging in there and being persistent. And it takes real stamina to stay present with our experience and to investigate it to the point where it really does cease, or the dukkha really does cease. And that's what we want, in this kind of situation where we're um, dealing with conflict or contention, standing up for protecting people, for um, living from a place of love instead of hatred, and so on, to really recognize that we want to be present with whatever is arising in ourselves, like I talked about earlier, and also present to what's going on with others, what we can ascertain from that, without just caving to our impulses. And when I think about the kinds of gatherings that have been happening, protests like the one today, what would be the most beneficial thing to bring to that? A coalition of peacemakers, coalition of, those who can look past the the heat, the turmoil. And stay present. Really remembering that our human capacity is to love, to see beyond this material world. Sometimes challenges bring out the best in us. We want to lean in that direction. And remember that when there's a lot of leaning in the direction of hatred and division, it's even more important for us to lean in the direction of unity and caring about each other. And it takes effort. It takes persistence. So I think it's helpful to see these three kinds of effort. The part that gets us moving, the initiative or the enthusiasm. And then the part that keeps it going, the persistence, the stamina, the staying power. And then the degree of effort we actually put in, the energy we put into things that are wholesome, and letting go of the unwholesome. And the mind can turn from one to the other so fast. And the Buddha even said there's no simile you can really use to capture the quickness of the mind. So our mindfulness has to be pretty fast too. Catch that. We can help each other too. You know, if we have good friends around us, such an important thing. If we people we trust who can remind us um, when we're not seeing it ourselves. Don't go dark. You're going dark. Don't go dark. It doesn't help to think about that so much. Just know it for what it is. And, you know, yeah. And with mindfulness, of course, we need that for accomplishing anything. And the power of mindfulness, the real value of it is this ability to stay present with what's uncomfortable, where the suffering is in ourselves. And when we see it in others, that we cultivate this response of compassion. There's a lot of pain over there in that hatred, or there's a lot of pain in here with this hatred. Whether it's outside or inside, it's the same story. That reminds me of, you know, how in the foundations of mindfulness and the Buddha encourages us to, you know, imagine a decaying corpse and saying, you know, this body is like that body, whether it's this one or that one out there, same thing. Think about the elements. Yeah, the earth element in here is the same as the earth element out there. Yeah, the emotions, the wrong view. We all have this. We all have these capacities. We all have personal and social and cultural conditioning. And yeah, Jim Samedo has been saying it's not like the personality view actually goes away. We just see it for what it is. We're not going to be able to make it perfect, and we're not going to be able to, it's not about getting rid of it because that's just wibawa tanha. That's just wanting to push it away, but it's not like that. As long as we're in this body, we're going to have the personality. It's just, do we see it for what it is and not operate from that place? So mindfulness is, this is what is so important, to be able to see it, and then the wisdom to know what's really there. What its cause is, and the effort to let it go or to stay with it until it dissolves. Yeah. It takes practice catching ourselves in mid sentence or recognizing some feeling that we know is just sense of self arising, wanting to be better than or wanting to be right. You know, can we drop that and really look at, is this wholesome or unwholesome? And there is a lot of relief when we recognize the wholesome, we turn towards that direction, turn in that direction. And as I was saying this morning, right, samadhi, and being able to, from time to time, experience calm, experience an absence of the hindrances enough so that we are developing a kind of a storehouse of what's soothing and healing. Mental support. Of course, samadhi is, you know, really for the development of the mind, the opening of the mind to wisdom, to insight. But anyone who's had a consistent practice at some point or whatever, we know how it helps us to feel steadier, calmer, more resilient. So I think it has a very, very important role, not just in the development of the mind, but also in the sort of soothing of the emotions and the body. So that leaves us with right view. The view that understands that as human beings, we have a kinship, even when we have such differing beliefs, such differing attitudes, and that we share so much. And that there's sort of on the kind of ordinary conventional level, we can see the value of really listening to each other and showing regard for each other, regardless of where we stand on things. And also to be clear about how important it is to keep the precepts and how dangerous it is when people don't have that, any of us, when we don't have that clarity. So, when the Buddha talked about not killing and speaking in support of not killing and so on with the precepts, the way we act and the way we talk, supporting what we know to be conventional right view. There is karma. There are results for good and bad actions. There are those in our life that have helped us that we really have the I don't know if I like either the word duty or obligation, but that's what it is to respond with um, gratitude and support, and that there's a balance in that. So this karma is a definite um, leveling phenomenon process, bringing things into balance. And we begin to learn, and as we refine our hiriotapa, our our conscience, our understanding of how things work, and our prudence, our care to not throw things out of balance by our actions, then we are more and more at peace. So recognizing that there is this very important application of right view, understanding the role we are in when we are moving through this world, and the wake we leave behind. So that means being circumspect about how we handle things. I remember there were a few people here today from um, once upon a time, San Jose area, going to the Dharma Punks group there, and it was kind of a funny family reunion. I don't know, we didn't all get together, but there were three people here today that were regulars at that group, and I remember one time having a discussion about the word appamada, their heedfulness, and some people really didn't like the word heedfulness. And it was triggering something. So we thought, okay, let's just use the Pali. When we were talking about what does this really mean, um, you know, to have this not heedfulness, appamada. What does it really mean? And I remember someone there, it was actually Vicky's husband. Someone here will know. But it was someone who said, oh, so not only is it taking the care in what you do and say, but it's also kind of an understanding of what the likely ramifications of it will be. And I thought that was really wonderful. It's like, yes, that's what Otapa is about. You kind of have this, you see down the road what's the result of this going to be. And when we're in a heated moment, it might be easy to forget, but this is a training to really sort of look forward, or maybe look back on what we've learned so far, and really want the ramifications of this action to be for the benefit of everyone. And so it's really that's a part of the development of the Noble Eightfold Path. It really, when we look into these factors, we can see how they connect and overlap each other, and we can see how it encompasses all of our life. It's really the Buddha's teachings it really includes everything in our life. It's a lifestyle. It was part of one of the discussions I mentioned earlier. There was this in one of the discussions at this retreat this week was, is Buddhism a religion, or is it a philosophy, or is it, when someone said, no, it's a lifestyle. And yeah, whatever else it is, it's a beautiful basis for our entire life.